Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA Roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 21st pick in the NFL draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy. We've got a fun show today. The offensive linemen and running backs worked out on Friday night at Lucas Oil Stadium here in Indianapolis for the scouting combine, and C-Mac and I are going to break it all down. But first, at the very top of the show, we've got Mr. Relevant, Louis Riddick, longtime NFL executive, ESPN analyst. He's going to join the show. We're going to talk a little bit about the formal interview process. For a guy who's been in that room for as long as he was, it's kind of interesting to get some of his insights, some of his honest insights into some of the things that have stood out to him over the course of his career and some of the lessons he learned along the way. So we get a lot of that from Louis Riddick at the top. After that, C-Mac and I are going to pick 6 players that are a little bit of the talk of the town after their workouts on Friday night. Draft Buzz, we'll cycle through all the rest of the guys that stood out to us on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium, and then we wrap it up with our draft mailbag. At the very top of the show, before we get to Louis Riddick, I just want to give you guys a quick reminder. Go into PhiladelphiaEagles.com/journey survey to fill out just a quick 3 to 4 minute survey. If you listen to the show year round, if you just listen to it during draft season, it's a quick way just to kind of help us out. We're trying to make this show better for you guys at home. So if you go and just take that quick 3-minute survey, it's all about content. Just tell us what you like, what you don't like about the show. Just a quick way to give us some assistance here as we move forward with this program, moving into 2020 and beyond. So you can do that, PhiladelphiaEagles.com/journey survey. You can hit this right on your phone just by scrolling into the podcast description, clicking on the link there. Of course, you can always hit it on my Twitter feed as well, at FDuffy3. All right, let's get into the top of the show. It's time for Mr. Relevant.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
Well, really excited to welcome into the Journey to the Draft podcast driven by AAA, longtime NFL executive, current ESPN analyst, Louis Riddick. Louis, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. This is cool. It's cool.
No, we're here in Indianapolis. And my first question for you is when you get into town, does nostalgia start to hit you? What goes? Do the interviews come into your mind? Do watching workouts come into your mind? Catching up with friends come into your what pops in your mind when you think about all right, I'm here in Indy, we're downtown, we're at Lucas Oil. What is it that first hits your mind when you think about the combine?
Yeah, you know what? Really, the routine is you just remember it so well.
Right.
About you see everybody. Well, really, the first thing that pops in mind, you see everybody walking around with credentials around their neck, and you see everyone. And this town is so condensed, and I don't want to say small, but it's a small downtown that you see everyone. You go, there's Coach Tomlin. Oh, there's Coach Belichick. Oh, there's Coach, and you see everybody all doing the same thing.
Right.
And so you quickly realize, what the process really involves here. You understand that there's meetings, there's physicals, there's workouts. It's to the dome, back to your hotel, look over some notes, to the interviews, right, back to your hotel, get something to eat, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, go to weigh-ins, watch them lift, watch them get measured, do some meetings. So, it's a process over and over and over every day, although they flipped it, totally opposite now when they interview guys in the morning and work out at night for our benefit. But you just know that it's very regimented. There's some long days, early mornings, late nights, but that's kind of part of it.
When I
was younger, when I was with Washington, as a matter of fact, some guys used to call it spring break in Indy because they loved coming here. And remember, that's when it used to be a little crazy here sometimes, as far as nighttime, just people getting out and seeing each other and having some fun. But I think this year, because of the way they've changed the schedule a little bit, I think there's going to be some late nights here with us here watching guys work out and stuff. But it's fun. You look forward to it every year. Although I will say, come Sunday, people will be gassed up to hit the airport and get out of here.
So what was your favorite part of the process while working in Indianapolis for
without
teams?
a doubt, the formal interviews are the best part, is to actually see these kids come in. And I say kids only because, I'm becoming a little bit of an old man now. And these guys are young. I have daughters their age. So to see them come in, you can see the anticipation, as far as they're thinking, what are you going to ask me? You can see when guys are trying to safeguard and kind of keep back some of the information. They know they need to be forthright. They know they can't, engage in deception, but at the same time they're trying to put their best foot forward, and you try and disarm them and really just get at authentically who they are. I always enjoyed that part. I really like that part. The 40s are always cool just to see who's really fast out here, and the drills are fun. But, after a while you kind of realize, look, I don't want to get too caught up in this because I want to remember what these guys looked like on the field. And the further we get away from what they did on the field, that's where mistakes start happening. So I didn't get too caught up in this part. It's really the interpersonal part where I actually got to talk to them. That was cool for me.
Is there an interview or interviews that stand out to you throughout your career that were like, man, like I knew at the moment, like I didn't have a feel of this guy when he first walked in, but after the interview, I knew this guy had it.
Yeah, there were a few. Look, Russell Wilson's interview was like, it's like this guy could be president. It was ridiculous. J.J. Watt, I remember in particular, had a very, very impressive interview. Robert Griffin III had a very, very impressive interview. One of the ones that still to this day just bugs me because I remember it for the wrong reasons, because I got the wrong impression, and the guy wound up becoming one of the great players of all time in this league was Earl Thomas. Because Earl was very quiet, very reserved, about what he was saying, and I just kind of thought, man, this is a free safety. He's supposed to be a leader. He's at the command and control center. He's a signal caller.
Did you think of Brian Dawkins?
I wanted him to be more like that, but he was very quiet, and it kind of like led me down the wrong path as far as what he would become. And again, that's another one of the things that you learn here is sometimes, in that 15 minutes, you don't have enough time to really disarm somebody and get to see who they really are. Because they're just trying to get through it sometimes, because it's nerve-wracking to have 8-9 people sitting there staring at you, knowing that, a lot of times, as a player, I used to inherently think that scouts and GMs were looking for things negative about you. So you're going to try and safeguard yourself. You don't really want to let yourself, shine too much, or rather, like, kind of let your true self out. And I think with Earl, he was just kind of being very reserved that day. And I let it affect me when I was kind of evaluating him, because he was fantastic as a player. And I think those are the things that you learn about this whole thing, and you get better at as far as when you're just talking to somebody. And that's why that's why even after this is over, it's imperative that you keep going with that process of getting to know who these guys are and really try and get them in an environment where you really get to see who they are, because that's really what the interviews are about. Tell me authentically who you are, not who your agent coached you to be or whatever preparation firm you went to, prepared you for this. Not what they told you. Just tell me who you really are. And it's hard to do that in that short amount of time.
Lou, when you scout the prospects on tape, would you try to get a sense of their personality by the way they play on the field?
Yeah, it kind of shines through more times than not. What I wanted to see is if it matched up with how they were once you got to see them face to face, the ones who you were fortunate to meet face to face. And that's what I'm saying with Earl. It was like two different dudes. Like, there's a guy here on the field who can play all these positions, who's flying around like a kamikaze, but then when he came in here, he was very quiet. And so it kind of like, I don't know if it led me to not necessarily believe what I saw on tape, because I was like, this doesn't really match up. Am I being like, what's the story here? So yeah, but there, at the same time, there's people who play the game one way, but they're not that way off the field.
Right,
there's people who play the game like absolute killers. Brian Dawkins is that guy,
yes.
right? I got to work with him at ESPN for a while, and obviously he was in Philly. He was leaving right as I got there. Brian is as mild-mannered as they come. You know that when you're talking to him. He's as good a person, just mild-mannered, and out on the field, it's just like, who's that guy?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's that's the challenge of doing this, is trying to figure out exactly what you're going to get, not just on the field, but off the field. People you can trust, people who you know are committed to it. The whole axiom, does he love football, which is so played out, but it's true. In some senses, how much does he really care about it? How much does he care about his family? How much is he going to care about taking care of himself? Those are all. That's what makes this so challenging, man, because there's so many variables.
You talk with scouts like around the league that have been at it a long time. They say like the more you watch guys, you have that Rolodex of players that you can refer back to when you make like comparisons to players on the field.
Yeah.
Is it the same way when you have those interviews? Like, man, like this guy just reminded me of this player when he walked in. He had that same kind of presence and that same kind of feel.
Yeah. You wind up doing that. There's obviously guys who kind of set a standard of what you would like to see when they come into those interviews. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be great players, but you're right. There are people who who conduct themselves in an interview the way that you're attracted to, and you kind of go, okay, this is the kind of person, this is how I want people to be. You know, RG3 didn't have a great career, so to speak, you know, as far as longevity is concerned, but his interview was the way you want him.
Right.
Okay. There was nothing that this guy couldn't answer as far as off the field or on the field. He had every freaking answer. Russell was the same way. J.J. Watt, you just knew that, and J.J. wasn't even close to being as good as he became, but you just knew as a guy, you were like, I want this guy in my locker room. I want to be around that dude right there. You know what, another interesting one, look, Taylor Mays, when he came out of USC, didn't have a great career, but his interview, shit, I was like, man, I liked me some Taylor Mays. You know, big guy, looked good, was dressed real. I mean, he didn't have on a suit. He just had on some nice clothing. So you just, and you know when you're around people, you're just kind of like,
carries himself
I'd
well.
like to hang with this dude a little bit. And that's important. It's important. And again, that's the challenge of putting together the whole puzzle. So sometimes guys do great in that. You get out on the field, they shrink. Some guys come in the meeting room, you can't get a word out of them. Go out on the field, they're animals. It's like, man, so that's what makes it fun. That's why we're all attracted to it.
Sure.
In those interviews, how do you balance the football aspect of the interview and the off-field stuff when trying to really get to know the players?
Yeah, I think a lot of times with the off-field stuff in these interviews, you just want them to be, as long as they're truthful. Let's just put it that way when you're talking about balancing off-field with on-field. So if you have good reports on a guy, when he comes in there, you generally are expecting him to come off that way. You don't want him to come in there and act like a jerk all of a sudden, you know, where you're going, okay, have I been deceived by this guy? You know, people said he was a good guy, but this guy's really rubbing me the wrong way. And at the same time, if you know there's some bad information about a guy, meaning he's done some things wrong, and you kind of get around to asking him about it, and he either tries to downplay it or just flat out lies to you about it, which that has happened too in my experience, you don't want that either. You just guys want to authentically be who you are. There's nothing worse than someone who was something to your face and behind your back is something else. There's nothing worse than that. Andy used to talk about it all the time, about trust. That's what it is. Two things Andy used to say, you know, when we were there was, don't steal and don't lie to me. Because if you do those two things, then you've ruined it with me. I can't deal with liars, and I can't deal with people who take stuff from me that isn't yours. So that's all you can ask for. Because look, if you weren't still interested in a guy, even though he had some baggage and he'd made some mistakes, you wouldn't have brought him in there and interviewed him.
Right.
Okay. What's the point? You don't have enough time. So you're willing to work with a guy, but then if he tries to lie to you about it, it's just like, well, now you've wasted my time. Now I'm ticked off. Now I'm just get out of here. And I saw that happen too in interviews. I saw Coach Reed, basically we're talking to a guy, and the way he was acting, I could tell it turned Andy off like that. He was like, you can end this interview and send him out. So those are the things that you're trying to find. And then really, I mean, I think Bill Polian said that it's like speed dating, and it is what it's like. You can't find out everything in that amount of time, but that's what you have to work with, so you try to make the best of it.
The last thing I want to ask you about is just, you know, I saw last week on Twitter you were effusive in your praise of Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, man.
About, you know, a lot of talk about the wide receiver position for the Eagles in this draft, and you know his teammate Henry Ruggs and the 40-yard dash. When you're looking at speed at receiver, at that position in particular, how hard is it as you're leading up to the draft in a personnel room and you're trying to gauge, like, all right, this guy could be available or he could not be available based on, you know, because that speed could be such a wild card.
Yeah.
How much can that affect your ability to kind of project this guy may or may not be here for us when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I think what that requires, obviously, is for you and your scouts to have a good feel for how the rest of the league is talking about someone in order to determine what the price is for this guy and how far up you're going to have to go if you want to work with him, even if it makes you uncomfortable, because I mean, that's really what the draft really is, just a pricing mechanism, right? I mean, a lot of times you see guys get overdrafted simply, well, they get overdrafted because people become enamored with certain physical characteristics of a guy, and it is tough sometimes. Some guys you don't have a good feel for, and sometimes you have to overshoot just because you heard a rumor somewhere somehow about some team that has, you know, had him in to work out. A certain wide receiver coach or offensive coordinator said he really likes this guy. But that's what you're paid to do as the final decision maker, to try and figure that out. That's why, really, when you hear GMs talk, the best, very, very best GMs, they just tell their scouts, look, don't worry about the price points. Get the information. If you hear somebody talking and you know we're interested in a guy, and you hear people saying we haven't valued here, take the information, but don't you worry about it. You just evaluate the player properly. As the decision maker, I'll decide what price we pay and whether it's too rich or not for us.
Sure.
And that's why you're paid what you're paid as a GM, and it ain't always easy. And sometimes you make that pick, and people sit there and go, how do you pick that guy that high? And you're just like, well, if it was so damn easy, you'd be doing it, and you would be nailing all these guys. And it's hard.
Right.
It's
Sure.
hard because, I mean, the guys get emotional in draft rooms.
Yeah.
You know, when people are on the clock, people get fidgety, man. People get tight.
That clock's ticking.
They get tight, especially when owners are sitting there looking at you, and you're picking, like, in the top 10 and stuff. It's amazing how, like, people all of a sudden their lips get tight, and they're just like, it's a hard thing to do, but that's why we love it.
Yeah, well, Louis, really appreciate the time here on the Journey to the Draft podcast driven by AAA. Best of luck to you guys for the broadcast this week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Now it's time for Pick Six.
All right, so before we get into Pick Six, I'll welcome in Chris McPherson, C-Mac.
Good day, Fran.
Overall takeaways from Louis Riddick.
I love his analysis on ESPN.
Yeah.
I think he does a phenomenal job. He's very passionate about the game. If you follow him on Twitter, it comes through. When he really likes a player,
Yeah, he doesn't hide
he
it.
doesn't hide it whatsoever. And that's why I wanted to know the discussion. That's why I brought up during an interview how when you're looking at a player and you're seeing how he plays, do you want to see that play personality carry over to how they are off the field? And it's difficult sometimes because he kept bringing up, he brought up the Earl Thomas, what he learned from that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
From that situation, but it immediately made me think of Brian Dawkins because he is the exact same way. Like, I instantly thought of it, and then I'm like waiting for him to kind of reference it since their pass crossed in Philadelphia, and sure enough, he did. So it's a very difficult ongoing process of just taking lessons you've learned from previous draft mistakes and trying to get better from them moving forward because it's so hard. It seems like most people feel like they can get the stuff on the field from a tape standpoint, but it's trying to figure out who that person is going to be. And that's why actually one of my favorite questions to ask prospects here in Indy is you're about to become an NFL player. You're going to have the pressure of being a high draft pick. You're going to have money in your pocket. How are you going to be prepared to handle that? And that's something that some of these guys have good backgrounds that they're able to have people around them to support them, and some do not. And that's why some guys don't make it in the NFL.
Yeah, it's certainly the part of the process that makes it the inexact science that it is. But really great insight there from Louis Riddick. All right, C-Mac, let's get into Pick Six here. 6 guys that worked out on Friday that really kind of got the buzz going here in Indianapolis with the way they worked out. I'll let you kick things off.
I really feel bad with this one, okay? Really feel bad because I'm like, you're going through which of the guys, offensive line, it was the offensive line and the running backs who worked out, like which guy should we pick from? And to me, it just was a no-brainer. Tristan Wirfs from Iowa. I almost wanted to say, can we do Pick Six? Tristan Wirfs, okay, was a star of the night. Can we do the 6 other players? But you go through the timing and testing drills, okay? An offensive line best 4.85 in the 40, okay? 36.5-inch vertical, the offensive line record for the combine, okay? 121 inches in the broad jump, ties the offensive line record at the combine, okay? So the timing and testing drills, outstanding, off the charts. Then you get to position drills, and his change of direction was so fluid. He was quick out of his stance, very smooth. They have the new version of the mirror drill where it's not – before it was they had another player who was the rabbit. Now it's just a coach, and it was actually former Eagles offensive line coach Juan Castillo just kind of points. So it's very similar if you're familiar with the wave drill where the player has to get up – off their stomach, and then they're going back, forth, and side to side. It's almost very similar to that.
Sure.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that changed moving forward, but he was just very, very balanced throughout the entire workout. The mirror drill, I put that especially. So, and you just look at the body composition, especially the quads.
The lower half is ridiculous.
Just so impressive. So Tristan Wirfs, he's one of the players who – even if you're a casual draft fan, he's a name you feel like you've heard since the very beginning, going back to the summer and probably like the early 2020 mock drafts that he was in that top 10 discussion. Certainly to me cemented that he should be one of the first players off the board in this draft.
And there's so much from his profile that you have to love too, right? I mean, the body, you talked about the body type. He's got the length, but he was the first true freshman to start at tackle for Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. Kirk Ferentz has been at Iowa like my entire life, and he's been the first true freshman to start there for the Hawkeyes, a team that obviously consistently churns out talent along the offensive line. So that speaks a lot. You're talking about Robert Gallery was a number 2 overall pick.
Yeah.
Brandon Scherf, a top 5 pick. Some great prospects have come through there. He's the first to ever start as a true freshman. High school state champ as a wrestler in high school. People love that. Also a great track athlete as well. So this is a guy that has this background you have to love. Very decorated career, but overall, this is a big, strong, powerful human being. That explosiveness showed up on the field here, but a really fluid athlete. And I agree with you. In the drills, looked awesome as well. Just really fluid, twitched up. Really, really impressive performance from Tristan Wirfs. I'm going to go with the guy that I was really, really excited to see work out, and that's Wisconsin running back Jonathan Taylor. Matched everything we expected, right? I mean, he ran sub 4.4 in the 40-yard dash at over 220 pounds. That's an excellent speed score. What's a speed score? It's a weight-adjusted look at the 40-yard dash, and it's especially prevalent for running backs. Football Outsiders created this formula a few years. Well, I shouldn't even say a few years ago, a long time ago, and it's really all it basically is the weight times 200 over the 40-yard dash to the 4th power. So you math people will be able to get that. But ultimately, you math people. I'm not a math person. My little sister is a math teacher. She is the math person in the family. So I always refer to her, you're the math person. You figure this out for me. Jonathan Taylor, though, blew that part of the workout out of the water, was really good in the rest of the drills as well. Most importantly, perhaps, did a really good job catching the football in Friday night's workout. A lot of those running backs, honestly, after each group goes, I'll just kind of assign like A's and B's to the guys that worked out, some C's as well. But Jonathan Taylor, he got an A, and I think that when you look at the way that he worked out, I think that's really big for his stock moving forward in terms of teams having a little bit more faith that he can be a true 3-down back. He caught the ball well, I thought, on Friday night.
By the way, if you haven't read the Fran Duffy cheat sheets to this point, 2 for 2 here. Talking about with the guys you brought up, in terms of looking at.
They were both my stopwatch shockers for each position group.
Yeah, so great pick there with Taylor. He was the first running back I actually had listed as well in terms of overall workout, both the timing and testing and position drills. So definitely agree with that one right there. So I'm going to go with another offensive lineman. And I'm going to have a bit of a hot take here for a second.
Okay.
I said this to you when we were watching the workouts yesterday. Most fans, and I'll go NFL fans, even casual fans, the talk of this draft has been the really, really deep wide receiver class. And certainly Eagles fans are paying very much attention to it. But after watching these offensive linemen work out, I'm almost maybe a little more excited to see what's going to happen with these guys. Just because of the depth, the top-end talent that appears to be here in Indianapolis. Very excited for this offensive line. I think Howie Roseman said this, it's an offensive line deficient league. This is a year, I think, that teams can stock up on that talent, not just at tackle, interior line, depth throughout. So this, again, it was very tough in terms of trying to figure out narrowing down the top 6. And I'm going to steal a line from you here, Fran, because you said this when we were walking out of the workouts last night. I think the theme with the offensive line is the cream rose to the top.
Yep.
And Alabama's Jedrick Wills is going to be the second player I'm going to bring up for pick 6. Watching him go through the mirror drill yesterday, I said, if I want to pick a player from these workouts who I need to win a game of Dance Dance Revolution, I thought Jedrick Wills would be my guy. That, for whatever reason,
busting out the DDR take. I like
that. For whatever reason, that popped in my mind while watching him go through it. We'll start with the timing and testing drills, 5.05 in the 40, 34.5-inch vertical. I mean, these guys are out jumping some of their wide receivers.
I mean, Tristan Wirfs jumped 10 inches higher than Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb at like 100 pounds heavier, 115 pounds heavier. Silly. Wills did the same thing.
Wills was just 2 inches behind Wirfs.
Ridiculous.
Okay? 113, way above average in the broad jump. Thought he was outstanding in the pulling drills. Violent hands, just across the board was just so much fun to watch him. So it was great seeing Wills, and then 2 players later it was Wirfs. that back end of the offensive line group, which was interesting because the story for the first group, they pretty much they divide the offensive line into two groups to going through the workouts just alphabetically. And there was a war of attrition with the first group where
There's a mash unit out there.
where it was supposed to be 20 players total in the group, and I was just doing a quick count right before the podcast, and I think 8 players either did not work out at all or didn't finish. So those drills went by very fast, and then the second half, it's like every single guy is, for the most part, working out. So it made it a little bit longer, but to get to the back end here with Wills and Wirfs, certainly worth it there.
Yeah, I think certainly Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs were the two linemen that at the tackle spot that really rose to the top on Friday night. I'm going to go with another guy that was from that first group. That's Ezra Cleveland from Boise State. If you look at the raw numbers, was really, really impressive. 4.93 in the 40-yard dash, 4.46 in the three-cone, C-Mac. It's a better time than any offensive lineman they're drafted in the last 10 years. Outstanding number in the three-cone. Or that's in the short shuttle, rather, not even in the three-cone. Sorry about that. When you talk about Ezra Cleveland, he is a really, really impressive player in terms of his athleticism. Now, excited to see him from a film standpoint. I actually haven't even gotten to him yet. This is a guy that a lot of people talked about leading into the 2019 season. He was a little bit banged up early in the year, so some of that film, wasn't the best, especially early on. They played Florida State week 1. Some people are wanting to see a little bit more, but in terms of guys that generated some buzz, Ezra Cleveland really showed up well on Friday night.
Yeah, again, it was fun to watch these offensive linemen. So I'm going to go with not an offensive lineman in terms of a big man. I'm going to go with a big running back who really stood out, A.J. Dillon, okay? Again, another guy you mentioned here as one of the most productive college players. Wasn't as productive as Jonathan Taylor. But
still very productive.
Still very productive. I think you said it was the first Boston College running back to have consecutive 1,000-yard rushing seasons, if I'm correct.
He was first to do it as a freshman and a sophomore.
And then he had a third one. Yeah, so for good measure. But we have a guy who ran 4.53 in the 40. Okay, good for a running back, but he's doing it at 6 feet, 247 pounds. Okay,
yeah.
So big boy right there. But I thought he was great in the position drills and did a great job of catching the football out of the backfield. Just pretty much every route that he ran, smooth transitions, great in and out of his cuts, caught the ball well, no drops whatsoever. Was great on the blast read drill where it's like a read and recognition type drill. Really just top to bottom was checking the boxes all throughout the night. And even our audio engineer, podcast producer, Maven behind the scenes here, Peter Kelly, he was like, which one was RB8? And I was like, A.J. Dillon. He's like, yep, that's my guy. So there you go. So everyone was, he got the attention of everyone there in attendance.
Yeah, I'm going to stay at the running back spot for my final guy. And this is an interesting evaluation because when you look at Cam Akers, the junior from Florida State, the tools have always been there. The production was not always there, and the film didn't always look great because I would say it's kind of similar to Jalen Reagor, C-Mac, where the production fell off this year just due to the supporting system around him. And I think when you look at Cam Akers, he's running behind one of the worst offensive lines in the entire FBS at Florida State. Did not always look clean for him, and he was a guy who's only been playing the running back spot now for 3 seasons. He was a high school quarterback that threw the ball a decent amount. It wasn't like it was like an option quarterback. So I think when you look at Cam Akers, his best football is likely very much ahead of him. Catches the football very well. I thought he looked really impressive in that area on Friday night. But ultimately, this is a guy who's really athletic. He's tough. He's a high-character kid. The way that he worked out, I think, has a lot of people thinking, okay, this could be a guy that the arrow is pointing up on moving forward. He might get, I don't want to, overdrafted is not the word, but drafted higher than where his film may show going back to even just 2018. But ultimately, I think Cam Akers had one of the more impressive personal workouts on Friday night.
He was good, and it's very interesting. I thought Deandre Swift was solid.
Yep.
I thought he had a good workout.
Yeah, he did.
And when you look at the running back group, there's not a guy, it's not a Saquon or Zeke Elliott or Christian McCaffrey who you're like, this guy's a top 10 guy, okay? And, I think when you look at most mock drafts and you talk to people who do mock drafts, I think they're kind of almost struggling to say, where's a guy going to go in the first round? It's probably going to be in the back half of the first round. But it's going to be very interesting that once a guy does go off the board, because the depth at the top is pretty good. And I think Cam Akers very much is putting him in that discussion to be maybe not the first running back selected off the board, but could be the second or third guy up there. So very, very good workout. And again, it's making this job very tough for teams who now have to go back and go through all these guys to say, all right, how are we going to sort these out? So it's going to be things like medical and interviews and the little things that help be tiebreakers. But a lot of guys here in Indy helping their cause.
So those are the 6 players that we felt generated the most buzz coming out of Friday night. Now let's kind of put a ribbon on the rest of the workouts here. It's time for Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, C-Mac, let's start with the offensive line, since that's the group that worked out first amongst the 2 positions. And again, like we did yesterday on the podcast, we'll reflect on my positional cheat sheets to kind of start the conversation. So my workout warrior for the offensive line was Sadiq Charles, the left tackle from LSU, got hurt very early on, right in the 40. So throw that one out for me. Off the radar was Alex Taylor, who has solid workout. I thought he was okay.
Tarantula was what you called him.
I did.
It's so freakish because
he's all arms and legs, man. I mean, he's something to look at.
I mean, it's crazy when you see him on the field. Like, it's to the point where when you're standing out in a group of offensive linemen for your body profile, that's when you have to say to yourself, that's a massive human being.
Yeah, when you look at the weight adjusted stuff, it's going to look just solid. I think the broad jump at 116 inches, really, really impressive. He's 308 pounds. He's got 36-inch long arms. He's got over 11-inch hands. I mean, he's a monster of a human being. So I still feel good about my off the radar, but I would say some of these guys probably outperformed him a little bit. My stopwatch shocker, we said earlier, Tristan Wirfs, and I thought Josh Jones, the tackle from Houston, would kill the drills, and I think he did. I think he had a solid workout overall, the left tackle from Houston. But one guy that we haven't hit on him yet that I think generated the most wow moment maybe of the combine so far was Makai Bekhten, the tackle from Louisville.
Talk about massive. Sorry, I used massive for the wrong player here. So
I mean, he's 6'7". He's 364 pounds. That's heavier than any tackle drafted in the last decade.
Did you see the one note from Daniel Jeremiah, actually, though?
What's that?
Okay, so for the first time...
that's right. I did see this.
Yeah, so for the first time, they do the weigh-ins, okay, when the players first arrive early in the week, but because there's an extra day between the weigh-ins and the actual workouts, they're doing another quick weigh-in right before the workouts begin. And I guess it's just to see, how much water are these guys losing? What did these guys do? Did they just try to get to a certain number on the official weigh-in day? So Bekhten actually was 357 pounds, 7 pounds lighter. So sorry to take a little tangent there, but
the record, I don't want to say the record, but the heavest tackle drafted in the last decade was 358. So just shy.
He's there. He's there.
He's just about there. He goes and he runs a 5.1. He's like, what? This is ridiculous. And then he ends up getting hurt, unfortunately. So it felt terrible for him coming off the field. You could really see the disappointment in his face. But a guy that certainly helped himself just with one test.
Exactly.
We didn't get to see him go through anything else. But Makai Bekhten, certainly a guy that impressed with what he did early on in the workout. But a couple other guys. And C-Mac, I mentioned to you, I said the cream rising to the top with the offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. To me, there were 3 guys that were in a tier by themselves with how they looked in the positional workout. It was Tristan Wirfs.
Yep.
It was Jedrick Wills.
Yep.
And it was Michigan center Cesar Ruiz.
Yeah.
Those were the 3 guys that I thought, man, every drill looked exactly how, in my eyes, it should look, and just looked outstanding from start to finish. The workout, the testing was good. The positional workout was just as good, if not better.
Yeah, Ruiz, again, you mentioned the timing and testing numbers, just good across the board. Thought he was very explosive coming out of the pulls. Very good in the mirror drill. Stayed low, showed good form in the pass rush dropping drills. Just top to bottom was just checking all the boxes, very solid. And every year there's an interior lineman, especially of late. There's an interior lineman who's going to surprise you with where they go in terms of how early they go in the draft. And I think Cesar Ruiz has put himself in position to be that guy this year.
I 100% agree. I think he's the guy. He's over 320 pounds, and the way that he moves, I could see a team pulling the trigger there. late round 1, early round 2, a little bit earlier than maybe people thought. But he's a guy that really stood out. Matt Hennessy, the center from Temple,
Yep.
I thought it looked really good across the board in most drills. Hakeem Adeniji, the tackle from Kansas, who has could potentially play a little bit of guard, has played some center throughout his career as well. This is a player that I think has the versatility, the athleticism, the demeanor. Seems like a really nice kid as well. Off the field, I thought he had a good workout from start to finish.
Big fan of Adeniji going back to the Senior Bowl.
Yep.
That's first caught my attention. I think one of the days he was like my practice player of the day or pick six, guys who stood out. But good numbers in the vert, 34 inches, 115 inches in the broad jump, solid 5.17 in the 40.
Yep.
Was quick around the edge, showed good punch. Just another guy who's using the draft process to his advantage by turning it out in the Senior Bowl and then having a good workout here in Indianapolis.
So 3 guys just to wrap up the offensive line that kind of under the radar. I felt just kind of did some really good stuff.
Okay.
John Mulchand.
What's it? Do you know? I knew not a thing about him.
He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list.
Okay. Okay.
So we expected some athletic numbers, and I thought he did a good job there. But just in the positional workout, I thought he flashed. I thought he again checked a lot of boxes, looked really solid. You may have seen him on the broadcast. He's the one with the very demonstrative mustache.
That's a good, that's a good way to put it.
He had that going for him. And then you had 2 other guys. Danny Pinter, the center from Ball State, a crowd favorite.
Yes.
As he was a local kid, Ball State, not far away here in Muncie, Indiana. And then John Runyon Jr. I thought had a solid positional workout. And then you go back and you look at the athletic testing numbers, did a really good job across the board. And I thought he helped himself here on Friday night.
Yeah, fiery demeanor. I mean, he's probably going to be a late round pick, not going to be probably, day 1, day 2 selection. But his dad, Eagles great.
He was down there.
He was down there on the field, proud papa watching him. And, John Runyon Sr. has said that his son is more athletic than he is. So if you can combine the demeanor and the athleticism, someone's going to get a player who could possibly play in the league for a long time.
Another guy who has got versatility. He's played both tackle spots. He's played guard. Some people view him as a center as well. He's taken some snaps throughout the course of the pre-draft process. So someone to keep an eye on here. A couple here. Let's move to the running back spot. Just getting back to that cheat sheet. Workout Warrior, J.K. Dobbins, was announced just before, I believe it was on Thursday, that he was not going to work out. So, unfortunately, my Workout Warrior for this position thrown out the window. Off the radar, Levante Bellamy, around his 40, he pulled up. So, he did not run as well because he pulled up with an injury. So, another mash unit here for me. My stopwatch shocker, we talked about earlier, Jonathan Taylor, will kill the drills. Running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I thought he was one of my A players at the running back spot. Across the board was excellent. He was one of 3 running backs as well who stayed after to do some receiver drills.
Good point.
So did some things there as well, kind of showing off that versatility that we all know he has, and we've watched LSU this year. But this is a guy that caught the ball well, has got lightning quick feet, did everything really, really well at a high level. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, look, he didn't run the fastest 40. A lot of people didn't expect him to run the fastest 40, so I don't think you dig him on that. This is a guy that checks all the other boxes in terms of what you want at the running back spot in the NFL.
Especially today's NFL, okay,
Absolutely.
where the running back needs to be involved in third down, not a single drop, caught the ball cleanly across the board, showed good vision in the off-tackle read and the blast read drills. We have to talk about real quick, forgot to mention a little earlier, with the running backs, new drill this year, okay?
The Deuce Staley drill.
The Deuce Staley drill. You go through all these drills, and they're named after routes and the different things they do. How many are named after a player, okay? The Deuce Staley drill. And I was able to catch up with Deuce after he ran the drill last night, and he actually had Darren Sproles, okay, who recently retired. He's now working as a personnel consultant for the team. Darren Sproles modeled the drill for the players before they did it. And the reason for Darren being out there was when the Eagles acquired Darren Sproles back in 2014 in a trade with the New Orleans Saints, Deuce Staley was like, I need a special drill for this guy, okay, to help him with his quick feet, his change of direction, to be able to improve it on a day-in, day-out basis. And he didn't feel like there was any drill out there that could do it. So he actually came up with this drill just for Darren Sproles and has incorporated it into his routine ever since. And a couple weeks ago, Kevin Colbert from the Steelers, the longtime general manager of the Steelers, who was there in Pittsburgh when Deuce Staley was a player on their Super Bowl championship team, reached out to Deuce and said, can we incorporate this drill into the combine workouts? Because that's the biggest thing. You look at the offensive line drills, you look at the running back drills, lots of new position drills being incorporated, and I think it's largely to showcase what is being utilized in today's game, because you saw a lot more variety in the pass routes,
no doubt,
from the running backs last night. So very, very cool to see. Great to see Deuce Staley get that moment on the NFL Network broadcast. Great to see Darren Sproles model the drill. And I was impressed to hear the story behind it. Deuce was actually like, it really should be the Darren Sproles drill because I came up with it for him. So great to catch up with Deuce last night to talk about that and to see Darren down there as well.
The players that I thought ran it best, I thought Cam Akers hit it out of the park. Benjamin was outstanding going through the bags in that drill. I'm just kind of going through my notes here, the guys that really stood out. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, as I mentioned, I thought did an outstanding job in that drill. Josh Kelly was solid, but Javon Leake, the running back from Maryland, who is a kind of a return specialist, was a change of pace player for them. I thought he was really good going through the bags in that drill for Deuce and for Darren. Just going through the rest of my
notes. Your boy
notes
Zach
here.
Moss, I thought did a good
Zach
job.
Moss did a good job. LaMichael Pirine from Florida had a good one. Scotty Phillips, the running back from Ole Miss, was really good there. Deandre Swift was outstanding. We haven't talked enough about Deandre Swift yet. I thought he checked every box. To me, I think it's him and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of who are the dynamic three-down backs in this class. I think those two guys really showed out well on Friday night. Jonathan Taylor, he looked really good actually as well going through the backs. Keyshawn Vaughn, the running back from Vanderbilt. We haven't talked about Vaughn. I don't think that he's getting, just kind of looking around and following social media on between the end of the workout and right now. I don't think enough people are talking about Keyshawn Vaughn, the running back from Vanderbilt. I thought he had a really strong workout. This is a guy who's got long speed. He showed that on film at the University of Florida. Run game, pass game, doesn't matter. This guy was a big play waiting to happen, and I thought he showed some of that juice on Friday night, and also really light feet going through the bags. I mean, you're talking about firecracker feet, getting them up and down. I thought this kid looked really impressive on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Thought he was good from a pass catching standpoint. The third back who did the receiver drills, Salvin Ahmed from Washington. And I thought he showed that throughout the course of the positional workout, was very good from that standpoint. He had one drop early, but afterwards caught the ball cleanly, especially when they started getting more vertical down the field on the wheel route. So I also thought he was good in the Deuce Staley drill as well. So he was another player when you're looking at those three-down backs who can help in the pass game. Thought very much helped himself here. You
know who I thought caught the ball really, really well as kind of an under-the-radar player was, we just talked about Deandre Swift, his backup,
let's go one.
Brian Herrien. Really, really natural catching the football. I wrote down numerous times, really soft hands where he's catching the ball. You can't hear anything. You don't hear a sound in the stadium. It just kind of shows off just how natural he was at plucking the ball out of the air. He made some really nice catches.
Had a one-handed catch.
Had a one-handed catch in the flat.
Yep.
No question. So Brian Herrien, I thought, had one of the more impressive workouts as a pass catcher. Josh Kelly, the running back from UCLA, a favorite of yours.
Rocky.
I think that Josh Kelly had a pretty good workout overall. Not a perfect workout. I didn't give him an A, but the rest of those guys I thought were really impressive. We didn't talk too much about Benjamin. He caught the ball well, really good feet in drills, was able to navigate through tight spaces, kind of navigate the bags really well. I thought he did a good job overall from start to finish.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anyone else who who missed out on, but no, I really think of all the guys, I think you did a great job there wrapping up those last couple of guys we need to touch on. So I think when you look at who are the guys who helped their cause, I think we pretty much came up with a list here for you.
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's get to the end of the show here. It's time for Draft Mailbag.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, so as always, before we get into our draft mailbag questions, just a quick reminder, go on to wherever you listen, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, you can go to YouTube, wherever you listen. Leave us a 5-star rating. Leave us a comment. If you leave a question, we'll answer it here on the show. We've got a couple here. Free Boosie left a 5-star review saying, makes me a smarter fan. Love the draft process, and this is the best draft podcast out there. Would highly recommend to anyone interested in NFL prospects, even if you are not necessarily an Eagles fan. So thank you very much for that comment. Let's go to a question we've got from Herbicidal. Good question here, C-Mac.
Okay.
I know what X, Y, and Z receiver positions are, but don't know the individual traits that receivers need to have for each position. Can you please explain? So, real quickly, the X receiver is on the line of scrimmage. So this is a guy that, number one, has to be able to beat press coverage. You're going to see press more often than not when you line up at the X receiver position. They're often called the split end because they typically line up opposite the tight end in the formation, so to the weak side of the formation. And they also can be isolated to one side of the formation. So when you hear us say a 3-by-1 set, that one receiver is your X receiver. So this is a player that has to be able to create separation on his own. He's not going to be running all the time as a part of 2 or 3 man route concepts. So that means you may have to win vertically. You've got to have some speed, but also laterally. You've got to have that quickness to get in and out of breaks to win at the top of the route. So you're talking like prototypes here. Calvin Johnson, Julio Jones, they're the prototypes. Big, strong, but very dynamic athletes as well at the X receiver position. The Z receiver, on the other hand, is off the line of scrimmage. So they're lined up to the tight end side. They're called the flanker. They flank the tight end. They're off the line of scrimmage. So this guy can be put in motion. He can be used in different ways. You can get a little bit more creative with him. And since he's off the line, he'll typically see a little bit less press coverage. So you can, quote unquote, hide a guy a little bit easier there. But also you can get a little bit creative. But that being said, since he's to the tight end side, you want this guy also to be able to handle himself as a blocker. He can't be a soft finesse player to that side of the field. And then the Y, in my lexicon, that would be the tight end. But I'm assuming you're talking about the slot receiver here. Some people may call that seem like the F or the H. He lines up inside, obviously. In this position, has just evolved over the course of the last decade plus. I mean, it used to be it was typically your small, short, shifty guy, but you still see those guys. But you also see bigger physical players that are lined up in the middle of the field. Regardless, you need that toughness to be able to work in traffic. You're going to have a lot of bodies working in the middle of the field. You're dealing with linebackers and safeties, so you want a guy that can handle working in traffic. You want someone who's very reliable as a pass catcher inside. So, it's a lot like a tight end. You're dealing with all of that traffic. A slot receiver doesn't usually see a lot of press coverage because, like the Z receiver, they're off the line of scrimmage. But unlike the Z receiver, they've got a two-way go, because they can release inside towards the middle of the field or outside towards the sideline. So typically, defenders are a little bit less likely to go up and press them because you've got that two-way go. You can win in a couple different ways there to keep the slot corner on their toes. So typically, you're not going to see a lot of press in the middle of the field. But regardless of all this, C-Mac, I think it's important to note that in most offenses now, guys have to be versatile. They have to be able to play multiple positions. So, you're not going to be just an X receiver, just a slot receiver, just a Z receiver. And I think we've seen that in Philadelphia. Guys are moved around the formation,
Certainly.
Lined up in different spots. And, that just helps keep the target off your back as a receiver. And, you don't know exactly where you're going to line up, and you can be used a lot of different ways by the coaching staff.
Which is why, I'll preface this here, that fans are going to hope the Eagles use a high pick on a wide receiver. Totally understand that you want to give Carson Wentz a stable of weapons. But guys are going to need time to take a transition because a lot of them are learning multiple positions and some for the first time. So I think that's something that's very important to keep in mind when you talk about, as they're making the transition and getting acclimated to the NFL, that's not just, put them up out wide. They're going to be having to learn the nuances of every single position. I'll throw this at you quickly if you want to answer.
Sure.
Do you have an idea, to go back to Herbicide's question, a prototypical X, Y, and Z from this draft class?
Or from this draft.
From this draft class. Or maybe not prototypical, but just a
Sure.
someone who might come to mind who kind of fits the bill.
So Henry Ruggs is like he is a Z, but also I think he could play X as well because he's got that ability to create some separation down the field as well. But I think ultimately you really like him as your Z receiver, kind of move him around. He's tough as a blocker as well, so you're not worried about that end of it.
Because this, I think, comes into when you look at the draft evaluation. It's not just that they're going to play a receiver; it's which type of receiver. And I know you and Ben love having this philosophical argument of, you can't just put every receiver, even though all the receivers work out together, they're coming in such different shapes and sizes and styles that it's with some of them, I'll use the apples and oranges comparison there.
Yeah, I think when you look at who are the Z receivers. There's a lot of them in this class. I mean, Jerry Jeudy, I think, could be a slot or a Z. I think CeeDee Lamb is a Z. I think Jalen Reagor is a Z or a slot. Henry Ruggs, I mentioned, I think is probably more of a Z. I think you look at Justin Jefferson. This is a guy that had lined up primarily in the slot. Mm-hmm. But I kind of like his ability to play Z or to play X as well.
Yeah.
I think he can get off the line of scrimmage. He can certainly can create his own separation. So if you're going to line him up outside, I think he can go and win as an X. KJ Hamler, more of a Z or a slot. Brandon Ayuk, more of a Z or a slot. Laviska Shenault, he's got the ability to line up anywhere, from a physical standpoint. I mean, he's got the tools in his body to be able to win in a number of spots. You talk about those bigger wideouts, right? So T. Higgins, more of an X, right? Antonio Gandy-Golden, Michael Pittman, those guys are X's. I think that, it goes down to teams when they have the receivers up on the board and you're stacking by position, they're not just having it as wide receiver. They're going to have it by the positions they have on their depth chart. So they're going to have all these guys stacked as, slots, X, Y, Z, all that different. They're going to have all of those kind of built in. And that's across the board. You're talking about both defensive end spots. You're talking about both tight end spots, both corner spots, both safety spots. So they definitely divvied up a little bit differently than how you'll see in NFL.com or ESPN or The Athletic. No matter where you look, it's a little bit more broken up for sure. Mm-hmm. So that'll do it. Fun episode here breaking down the running backs and the offensive line. We will be back tomorrow to break down the front seven. That happens on Saturday night. The edge rushers, the defensive tackles, the linebackers, they all take the field at Lucas Oil Stadium. We'll be back here tomorrow to break it all down for you, tell you exactly who stood out here from the NFL Combine. For CMAC, I am Fran. For Peter Kelly, thanks as always for producing in the back. We are going to see you tomorrow.